Over 60, top 6 drinks that keep your eyes young and bright. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to share will shock you. Did you know that 99% of people over 60 have no idea that the very drinks they pour into their glass every day could be the key to keeping their eyesight young, sharp, and bright, or the silent reason it's fading faster than it should? For decades, people have been told, vision loss is just part of getting old. Others believe, it's all in your DNA and there's nothing you can do. Well, I'm here to tell you that's wrong. The truth is, while aging is natural, the decline of your eyesight is not set in stone. And the surprising part, some of the most powerful protectors of your vision aren't fancy supplements or expensive treatments. They're simple, everyday drinks you already know, but almost nobody realizes how much they can do for the eyes. And here's where it gets interesting. One of these drinks is something most people think is bad for you, yet in moderation, it may actually lower your risk of vision loss. Another is so common that you've probably ignored it your whole life, even though it's the single most important thing your eyes are begging you for right now. So, let me ask you if staying independent, reading without strain, and recognizing the faces of the people you love depends on what's in your glass. Wouldn't you want to know the right choices to make starting today? That's exactly what I'm going to show you, the 6 drinks that science proves can protect, energize, and even rejuvenate your vision after 60. And trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very end because the last one on this list will surprise you the most. But before we dive in, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend who deserves to keep their eyesight strong, and subscribe to the channel. Every click gives us the fuel to keep creating eye-opening health tips that help you live longer, see clearer, and stay vibrant, no matter your age. All right, let's jump in because your eyes deserve more than just getting old. They deserve to stay young and bright. Why eye health declines after 60. Once we pass the age of 60, our eyes begin to face challenges that are both natural and, to some degree, preventable. The lens, that clear structure in the front of the eye, gradually becomes cloudy as proteins inside start clumping together. That's what we call cataracts. By the age of 80, more than half of Americans either have cataracts or have already had surgery to remove them. Then there's the macula, the small but critical part of the retina that gives us sharp central vision. Over time, the macula can thin and wear down, leading to age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of blindness in seniors. Nearly 1 in 10 older adults will develop advanced AMD, and the risk only increases as we age. The optic nerve also becomes more vulnerable over time. This nerve is like the cable that connects your eyes to your brain. If it weakens, often due to elevated eye pressure, it can lead to glaucoma. What makes glaucoma especially dangerous is that it often shows no early warning signs. You could lose side vision slowly and not realize it until significant damage has been done. Today, about 3 million Americans live with glaucoma, and nearly half don't even know they have it. Another silent factor is blood circulation. Just as arteries in the rest of the body stiffen with age, the tiny vessels in the eyes also lose efficiency. That means less oxygen and fewer nutrients reach critical structures like the retina and cornea. Poor circulation can make the eyes feel dry, strained, and tired. Hearing this, many people assume vision loss is just something we have to accept with aging. But that's not the full truth. As a doctor who has worked with thousands of seniors, I can tell you this, while aging sets the stage, lifestyle choices determine the outcome. We now have strong evidence that nutrition can slow, and in some cases even prevent, serious eye conditions. The ARDS-2 study, one of the largest and most respected trials funded by the National Institutes of Health, found that nutrients like lutein, zeaxanthin, vitamin C, vitamin E, and zinc can slow the progression of macular degeneration by up to 25%. That's a meaningful difference not just in eye health but in quality of life. I often tell my patients to think of their eyes as a garden. If you water and feed that garden, it stays vibrant. If you neglect it, weeds take over and growth slows. Your eyes work the same way. They need daily nourishment, antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals, to protect against damage and to keep vision clear. So ask yourself this, are you giving your eyes what they need, or are you unintentionally starving them? The encouraging part is that many of the nutrients that protect vision are easy to find in everyday foods and drinks. You don't need rare supplements or exotic powders. Small daily choices, like what you sip with breakfast or before bed, can protect your sight for years to come. And that's where we're going next. The top 6 drinks that can help keep your eyes young, sharp, and bright after 60. Drink number 1, green tea, the antioxidant shield. Green tea is one of the simplest and most effective drinks you can add to your daily routine for better eye health. It's packed with catechins, a type of antioxidant that protects the eyes from oxidative stress, the same process that contributes to cataracts, glaucoma, and macular degeneration. What makes green tea remarkable is how quickly these compounds get to work. A study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry found that catechins from green tea reach the retina and lens within just a few hours of drinking it, offering real and immediate protection. I've seen firsthand how this small habit can make a big difference. Margaret, a 72-year-old retired teacher, used to drink coffee in the afternoon, but it left her jittery and her eyes tired by evening. I suggested she replace her second cup of coffee with green tea. 6 months later, she reported less eye strain, and her ophthalmologist noticed that her cataracts were progressing more slowly than expected. It wasn't a dramatic overnight change, but it was a steady improvement that mattered in her daily life. Research backs this up. Studies show that regular green tea drinkers have a lower risk of cataracts and glaucoma, and scientists at the University of Hong Kong found that drinking green tea several times a week was linked to healthier retinal tissue in older adults. Green tea also improves circulation and lowers blood pressure, which helps deliver oxygen and nutrients to the tiny blood vessels in the eyes. So what can you do? Aim for 1 to 2 cups a day. Skip the sugar, which only fuels inflammation, and instead add a slice of lemon. The vitamin C in lemon enhances the strength of the catechins and makes the tea more refreshing. And if you don't enjoy hot tea, cold brewed green tea works just as well. I remember another patient, Howard, 69, who struggled with borderline glaucoma and constant dry eyes. We added green tea to his daily routine, not as a replacement for treatment, but as an extra layer of support. After a year, his eye pressure had stabilized, and he said his eyes felt less irritated. For him, it wasn't a cure, but it was part of a larger picture of small, smart choices that kept his vision steady. So ask yourself, if something as simple as a cup of tea can protect your eyes, why not make it a habit? One small swap repeated every day can add up to years of stronger, clearer vision. Drink number 2, carrot and orange juice, vitamin and C powerhouse. Carrot and orange juice is one of the simplest but most powerful combinations you can drink for your eyes. Carrots are rich in beta-carotene, which your body turns into vitamin A, a nutrient essential for night vision and for keeping the surface of the eye healthy. Without enough vitamin A, the eyes can become dry, and night blindness becomes more likely. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has shown that people with higher vitamin A intake have a lower risk of night blindness and age-related vision problems. Oranges, on the other hand, provide vitamin C, a strong antioxidant that protects the lens from oxidative stress, one of the main causes of cataracts. A long-term study in ophthalmology followed more than 2,000 women and found that those who consumed the most vitamin C-rich foods had about a 1/3 lower risk of developing cataracts. I've seen the benefits firsthand. Harold, a 68-year-old retired bus driver, struggled with glare from headlights and poor night vision that made driving stressful. After adding fresh carrot and orange juice to his routine 3 times a week, he noticed a clear improvement and felt safer on the road at night. Another patient, Maria, 71, had early cataracts and dry eyes. She wasn't interested in supplements, so I suggested she try the juice along with a handful of almonds. The healthy fats in nuts help the body absorb beta-carotene more efficiently. Over time, her eyes felt less irritated and her cataracts slowed in progression. The advice I give is straightforward. Enjoy carrot and orange juice 2 or 3 times a week, but make it fresh. Store-bought versions often lose nutrients and contain added sugar, which cancels out many of the benefits. Freshly squeezed juice delivers the vitamins your eyes need in their purest form. Pair it with a small serving of nuts or avocado to maximize absorption. So the question becomes, if a simple glass of juice can strengthen night vision, lower the risk of cataracts, and ease dry eyes, why not make it part of your routine? Protecting your sight doesn't always require complex treatments. It often starts with small, consistent choices at the table. Drink number 3, blueberry smoothie, the macular protector. Blueberries are often called a superfood, and for good reason. They are packed with anthocyanins, the pigments that give them their deep blue color and also serve as some of the most powerful antioxidants for the eyes. These compounds improve circulation in the tiny capillaries that feed the retina and help sharpen contrast sensitivity, which is the ability to see fine details and distinguish subtle differences in shades and colors. That's critical for tasks like reading, driving at night, or recognizing faces. Research published in Nutrients has shown that diets rich in anthocyanins are linked to slower progression of age-related macular degeneration, one of the leading causes of vision loss in older adults. Another study from the British Journal of Nutrition found that regular blueberry consumption improved blood flow in older adults, which is especially important for maintaining the health of the macula. I've seen the real-life impact of this in my patients. Linda, a 74-year-old artist, came to me terrified she might lose the ability to paint because her color perception was fading. We added a daily blueberry smoothie to her diet, blueberries blended with half a banana, a handful of spinach, and almond milk. Within a few months, she told me she not only felt her vision was sharper, but also that her ability to distinguish colors had improved. It wasn't just about eye health for her, it was about holding onto her passion and independence. Another case that comes to mind is James, a 70-year-old avid reader who found himself struggling with eye fatigue after just a short time with a book. He thought it was simply age catching up with him. I recommended adding blueberries to his morning oatmeal and occasionally blending them into smoothies. After a few weeks, he reported that his eyes didn't tire as quickly, and he was able to enjoy his reading again without constant breaks. Small, consistent habits can make a difference. As a doctor, I often remind my patients that the eyes, like the brain, rely heavily on blood flow and oxygen. When circulation is poor, the macula suffers and vision begins to fade. Blueberries directly support that circulation. So I ask, if a single, affordable fruit can protect your central vision, the very vision you need to read, drive, and recognize the faces you love, why not make it part of your routine? My advice is simple. Enjoy blueberries daily if you can. A smoothie is an easy, delicious way to do it. 1 cup of blueberries, half a banana, a handful of spinach for added lutein, and unsweetened almond milk make a nutrient-packed drink. For those who prefer variety, mix in strawberries or blackberries, which provide similar benefits. Whether fresh or frozen, blueberries retain their antioxidant power, so there's no excuse not to keep them on hand. Protecting the macula doesn't require complicated solutions. Sometimes it's as simple as blending a handful of berries into your breakfast. Over time, those small choices can safeguard the vision that keeps your world bright and clear. Drink number 4, beet juice, the circulation booster. Beet juice is one of the most underrated drinks for eye health, yet it can play a powerful role in protecting vision as we age. Beets are naturally rich in nitrates, which the body converts into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide works like a natural relaxant for blood vessels, helping them widen and improving circulation. For the eyes, better circulation means more oxygen and nutrients reaching sensitive tissues like the retina and optic nerve. This is especially important after 60, when blood flow to the eyes often declines. A study published in JAMA Ophthalmology found that people with higher dietary nitrate intake had a 20 to 30% lower risk of developing glaucoma, a disease caused by pressure damage to the optic nerve. I remember Robert, a 70-year-old patient who came to me with elevated eye pressure. He was already on medication prescribed by his ophthalmologist, but he wanted to do more to protect his vision. Together, we added beet juice to his weekly routine, just a few times a week and always in moderation. After several months, his pressure readings showed improvement, and his specialist was pleased with the additional support. It wasn't a replacement for treatment, but it became a safe, natural way to strengthen his care plan. Another patient, Elena, age 67, struggled with cold hands and feet along with occasional blurry vision. Her circulation wasn't great, which affected not only her comfort but also her eyes. She started blending beet juice with carrot and apple to soften the earthy taste, and within weeks she felt more energetic and noticed less eye fatigue in the evenings. For her, it was a reminder that the health of the eyes and the health of the entire circulatory system go hand in hand. As a physician, I often ask my patients, if circulation to the eyes is declining with age, why not use foods that naturally improve blood flow? Beets are a simple answer. The key, however, is moderation. Beet juice can lower blood pressure, which is helpful for many people, but if you already have low blood pressure or take medication, start with small amounts. Half a cup mixed with other juices is a safe way to begin. Pairing beets with carrots or apples not only balances the flavor, but also adds additional antioxidants that further protect the eyes. The truth is, healthy vision isn't just about protecting the eyes in isolation. It's about supporting the entire system that feeds and nourishes them. By improving circulation, beet juice gives your eyes a steady supply of what they need most: oxygen, nutrients, and protection from pressure damage. And sometimes, one simple glass can be the difference between eyes that struggle and eyes that stay clear and bright. Drink number 5. Water, the forgotten hero. Water is the most basic but often forgotten key to healthy eyes. Because the eyes are made up of about 98% water, even mild dehydration can cause problems like irritation, blurred vision, or dry eye syndrome. More than 16 million Americans suffer from dry eye, and many rely on artificial tears without realizing that the root of the issue may simply be not drinking enough fluids. I remember Rose, an 80-year-old patient who had been using eye drops for years with little relief. When I asked about her daily water intake, she admitted she only drank about 2 cups a day. Once we increased that to 6 to 8 cups, her symptoms improved dramatically and her dependence on drops decreased. Science explains why. Proper hydration keeps the tear film stable, which protects and lubricates the eyes while also washing away debris and bacteria. Without enough fluid, vision loses sharpness, and the eyes become more vulnerable to irritation and infection. Seniors are at particular risk because the natural sense of thirst diminishes with age, and many common medications, like diuretics, can accelerate fluid loss. So I often challenge my patients to take a closer look at how much water they actually drink in a day. 6 to 8 cups is a good target for most older adults, and it doesn't all have to be plain water. Adding a slice of lemon, cucumber, or mint can make it more enjoyable, and caffeine-free herbal teas can also count toward daily hydration. I think of Thomas, 73, who complained of eye strain from using his tablet. He relied on coffee throughout the day but rarely drank water. After making a conscious effort to hydrate, he noticed his eyes felt less tired and screen time became much more comfortable. The lesson is simple. Keeping the body hydrated keeps the eyes comfortable and clear. It doesn't require complicated routines, just steady daily habits. A glass of water may not seem like much, but for your eyes, it can be the difference between constant discomfort and lasting clarity. Drink number 6. Coffee in moderation, the unexpected ally. Coffee is often viewed with suspicion when it comes to health, but in moderation it can actually help protect the eyes. One of its key compounds, chlorogenic acid, is a strong antioxidant that shields the retina from oxidative stress, a factor in the development of age-related macular degeneration. A study in investigative ophthalmology and visual science found that coffee drinkers had a lower risk of macular degeneration compared to those who did not drink it at all. For many older adults, that daily cup of coffee may be doing more good than they realize. I remember George, a retired teacher, who worried that his morning coffee was harming his vision. After explaining the research, I encouraged him to keep his habit, but with moderation. He limited himself to 1 8-ounce cup a day, avoided sugary creamers, and enjoyed the comfort of his routine without guilt. Months later, he was pleased to know he could keep his favorite ritual while protecting his eyes. Other patients have shown me both sides of the story. Elaine, 69, loved her coffee so much that she drank several cups a day. Eventually, she developed eye strain and trouble sleeping, which only made her vision feel worse. By cutting back to 1 cup in the morning and switching to caffeine-free tea in the afternoon, her eyes felt more comfortable and her sleep improved. This is why I tell my patients that balance is everything. Moderate coffee intake may even support blood flow to the optic nerve, which is important in reducing the risk of glaucoma. But too much caffeine can raise eye pressure in sensitive individuals, so paying attention to how your body responds is essential. The general guideline is 1 modest cup a day, enjoyed plain or with a splash of milk. Avoiding sugary syrups and heavy creamers is key, since those add unnecessary calories and inflammation. Coffee in moderation is not the enemy, it can be an ally. When enjoyed wisely, it provides antioxidants, supports circulation, and gives a little energy boost without harming the eyes. For older adults, that 1 daily cup can be a small but meaningful step toward keeping vision clear and strong. So let's take a step back and recap what we've learned today. After 60, your eyes face real challenges: cataracts, macular degeneration, glaucoma, and circulation problems that can quietly steal your vision. But you are not powerless. In fact, you've just discovered 6 simple everyday drinks that can help keep your eyes sharp, strong, and bright. Green tea, carrot and orange juice, blueberry smoothies, beet juice, water, and yes, even coffee in moderation. Each one works in a different way, from boosting circulation to fighting oxidative stress to nourishing the very cells that protect your vision. And here's the takeaway. Protecting your eyesight doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't require expensive treatments or miracle cures. It's about small, consistent choices made every day that add up to a lifetime of clearer vision and greater independence. Remember, your eyesight is more than just what you see. It's how you connect with the people you love, how you enjoy your passions, how you stay free to live life on your terms. So now I'll ask you, what will you put in your glass tomorrow morning? Will it be just another empty drink, or will it be one that helps your eyes stay young and bright? Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button, share it with a friend or loved one who needs to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every click gives us the energy to keep bringing you more life-changing health tips that truly make a difference. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay healthy, stay strong, and keep your eyes shining bright.